I'd like to try a little experiment tonight. I'd like you all just to think, not to say, but to think of what's the worst Avera that you could imagine. Just for a moment, think what's the worst Avera that you could imagine. Okay, now, by a show of hands, how many of you thought of Avodah Zarah? Anybody? Okay, about a third. That's what I was suspecting. There's 3 Gimel Averos Chamuros, and Avodah Zarah is at least one of them. So it would make sense that about a third of you would think of Avodah Zarah. Now, I'm not choshed, Chalila, that anybody here has a get home, Chas v'shalom. But it could be that some of you may have something which is somewhat comparable to that. And I'll explain what I mean by that. There's a Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Kuf Hey Amud Beis. The Gemara says as follows: Amekareya begoda b'chamaso. If someone is so angry that he tears his clothes out of anger, v'meshaber kela b'chamaso, or he's so furious that he throws down a dish and breaks it on the floor, v'mafaze ma'osa b'chamaso, or he just takes the change out of his pocket and flings it across the room. He's so angry. So he lost his temper. This is like a feilach, right? The Gemara says, "Yeh beinecha," it should be in his eyes, ka'oved avodah zarah. Serving avodah zarah? He got angry, lost his temper, lost his cool. That's avodah zarah. Shekach ha'munaso shel yetzer hara. This is the craft of the yetzer hara, the Gemara says. Hayom omer lo aseh kach. Today the yetzer hara tells you, just do this. Lamachar omer lo aseh kach. Tomorrow the yetzer hara says a little bit more. Ad she'omer lo avodah zarah. Until the yetzer hara is going to say to a person, Chalila, to din avodah zarah. V'holech v'oved. And he'll actually go and he'll do it. So the Gemara is saying that if someone has such an anger management problem that he loses control of his temper, that he should consider that as serious as being oved avodah zarah. And that's our topic for tonight. When people lose control of their tempers, and it's a devastating impact on shalom bayis. Now, there's 2 possibilities. Your spouse loses their temper at you, or you lose your temper at your spouse. And we're going to discuss both tonight. Now, we'll start with your spouse, because that's what you really want to hear about. If your spouse loses their temper at you, how do you deal with that? So they're being over to avodah zarah, but you have to know how to deal with that. So I want to divide that into 2 sections. There's when your spouse loses their temper at you, b'shas maisa, and la'achar maisa. I want to give practical eitzes in both cases. The first case, b'shas maisa, the voice is raised, the insults are being hurled, and your spouse has totally lost control. How are you supposed to react to that? So, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is very clear. Where did I have that? I'm sorry, over here. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is very clear what to do and what not to do. Perek Daled, Mishnah Yud Zayin, Mishnah Yud Ches, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Al teratzes chavercha b'shas kaso. Don't try to appease your spouse, anybody, and certainly not your spouse. B'shas, they're angry. When they've lost control, when they're screaming, the voice is being raised, insults are being hurled, don't try to be meratzeh your spouse. Why not? It's counterintuitive. They're upset. You want to calm them down. Don't be so angry. Calm down. Take it easy. Lower your voice. The neighbors might hear. It's not so good. So the Tiferes Israel says, why not? Da pius az yirbe kaso. Because the very act of trying to appease your spouse is going to cause them to get more angry. Rabbeinu Yonah says the same thing. It's going to add kas. Now why is that? You're just trying to calm them down, and your spouse is losing control. So I'd like to suggest one possible terror to that, and that is that your spouse is angry because they felt hurt, insulted, disrespected, disregarded. That's why they're angry. Now you're going to say, calm down, it's not so gefährlich. It's not kedai to lose your temper like that. So it's going to be heard by your spouse as if you're saying, it wasn't so bad what happened. And your spouse is already hurt by it. And now you're saying they shouldn't even be bothered by it. They're going to be even more angry. So it's literally like pouring gasoline on the fire. To say, calm down, don't raise your voice, it's just going to make the person angrier. So you have to follow the words of Chazal, as we always have to do. We always have to take our marching orders from Chazal. And they're telling us, keep quiet. Let it pass. Don't give it more oxygen to the fire. Let it burn itself out. Okay, that's phase one. What about phase two? La'achar ha'maisa. Well, what does la'achar ha'maisa mean? I generally give it a rule of thumb, 24 hours. 24 hours later, you come back to your spouse and you bring it up. You say, yesterday, I think went a little too far. Now, your spouse's reaction is going to be to bring up the whole episode again and justify their kas because they felt they were hurt and insulted. And they're going to go back to the issue, whatever it was that they were upset about, and start getting upset all over again. But they're not necessarily going to get as upset as they were yesterday. If they do, revert back to plan A and say nothing. But if they're willing to listen to you, you make it clear that what you're talking about is not the episode. The episode is important, needs to be discussed, and will be discussed another time. What you're bringing up tonight or today is the fact that they lost their temper. Not the issue that they were angry about, not the incident that took place, not whatever happened or didn't happen the way they wanted, didn't want it, but just the fact that they expressed themselves in an uncontrolled kas manner. That's what you want to talk about. The issue, the subject, we'll talk about another time, and you can even make an appointment to discuss that. But right now, I want to discuss the way you spoke to me yesterday. It was unacceptable to lose such control and to have such kas. Now, again, if your spouse flares up again, revert back to plan A and keep quiet. But if your spouse is willing to discuss that, then you talk about how it felt, what it meant, how it's certainly going to affect the children, what it meant to you, how it felt to you, and that you want to discuss in a civil manner whatever it was that was ticked them off, triggered the explosion yesterday. Okay. That takes care of lion taming your spouse. B'shas maisa and la'achar maisa. But your spouse isn't the only one who could lose their temper. Sometimes it could be you. So how do you control your temper? If you understand that it's ki'ilu oved avodah zarah, but once in a while, you lost your temper. Now, you wouldn't say, chas v'shalom, once in a while, you'll take out a getchka. Wouldn't do that. You wouldn't have it in the house. And even if it belongs to the maid, you want to get rid of it. But to have unrestrained, uncontrolled outburst of temper, we saw already in Chazal say that's ki'ilu oved avodah zarah. So what are you supposed to do? How can you control yourself? You know it was wrong, you didn't mean to, but you lost control. So I have 3 eitzes that I want to share with you tonight. Practical eitzes. Also from Chazal. The first eitzah comes from Ramban. Now, I just want to give a little akdama to this. Kimat all the people that I've worked with who had anger management issues and needed help with that, when we began to explore what triggered the loss of temper, each episode, what it was, what they were thinking, what they were feeling, and what the background of the episode was, it became clear that one thing that they all have in common, people who tend to lose control of their temper, is that they have a marked inability to assert themselves in a healthy way. That means something's bothering them, they don't really know how to say it. They don't know if they should say it. They mistakenly believe it's best not to say it. It bothers me, I'll keep it quiet. 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, and then this Mount Vesuvius all over again. People explode because they don't know how to deal with their feelings in a healthy way. Well, wait a minute. Aren't we supposed to be mevater, and we're supposed to look away, and we're supposed to suppress our feelings? Isn't that what's expected of us? Well, in case that's what you think, let's just hear what the Ramban has to say about that. Now, it's in the Pasuk in Kedoshim, Perek Yud Tes, Pasuk Yud Zayin, Lo sisne achicha bilvavecha. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Hocheach tochiach es amisecha. Surely you shall reprove the members of your people. V'lo sisne alav chet, and don't bear a sin because of him. Now, I'm not going to read the whole Ramban, which is kedai to look into. I'm just going to read part of it. It says as follows. Al tisnes achicha bilvavecha. What does it mean you shouldn't hate your brother in your heart? Says the Ramban, V'asoso lecha shelo kirtzonecha. When he does something against your will. Ramban doesn't say when he does an aveira, when he violates the Torah. He did something, right or wrong. Doesn't mean right or wrong. He did something that wasn't according to your ratzon. It wasn't what you wanted. Aval tochichenu. Nevertheless, you should call it his attention. Now, the Ramban understands that maybe people have a difficult time asserting themselves. So the Ramban spells it out, Rachel bit Katana, what you're supposed to say. Madua kacha asisa imadi. Why'd you do this to me? Tell him. Beferish. Madua kacha asisa imadi. Why did you do this to me? V'lo sisa olav chet. And don't bear a sin because of him. Well, what's the sin you're going to bear? Lachasos sinoso belibcha v'lo sagidlo. When you suppress your feelings and you don't tell him that he bothered you, that's the sin, according to Ramban, not according to Meir Wikler. According to Ramban, when you try to suppress your feelings and don't tell your spouse what they did that bothered you, you're committing an aveira. Ki b'hochicha also yisnatzeh, because when you tell him what bothered you, then he can repair the damage. He can save the day. Or yashuv yisvada al chataso, or maybe he'll apologize. V'tachapelo, and then you'll forgive him. So the Ramban is making it very clear. This is for everybody. But alachas kama v'kama for your spouse. Your spouse did something that bothered you. It's hurt you, or offended you in some way. You're not doing anybody a favor by holding it back. It could build up and collect interest. And then when there's an explosion, your spouse doesn't know what hit them. So tell them in a nice way, you did this that bothered me. Maybe next time do it differently. And the whole matter can be cleared up. So that's Eitzah number 1, the Ramban's practical suggestion. Learn to be more assertive in a healthy way And they can help you not to be explosive in an unhealthy way and lose control of your temper. Eitzes number 2 and 3 both come from David HaMelech. There's a fascinating, to me, one of the most dramatic passages in all of Nach. In Shmuel Beis, Perek Tes Zayin, it talks about how David HaMelech was in the very unenviable position of having to flee the palace at a moment's notice with a very small band of men, running literally for his life, being pursued by his oldest son Avshalom, who was marching on Yerushalayim with a band of 400 men, intent on murdering his father and taking over the kingdom. So David HaMelech was literally escaping with an inch of his life, and as he's running away in this horrible, pitiful situation, being pursued by his own son, who felt it was time for the old man to move on and he should take over the family business and become the king, a little too soon, obviously, and he wanted to usurp the throne. And Shimi ben Gera came out. He saw David HaMelech in this pitiful state, running away for his life. And Shimi ben Gera has the chutzpah and the azus to pick up stones and throw them at David HaMelech. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he starts cursing him. Now the din is, a morid b'malchus is chayav misa. You don't need a judge, you don't need a jury, you don't need a bezdin. You don't need hasra and edim. A morid b'malchus is chayav misa. The only thing required is the king has to give the order to perform the execution. So Avishai ben Seruya says to David HaMelech, he draws his sword and he says to David HaMelech, just say the word and he's a dead man. And I will personally be happy to do the execution. So clearly, Shimi ben Gera was chayav misa and deserved the death penalty. And all David HaMelech had to do was give a nod, and Avishai ben Seruya would have carried out the execution on the spot. Justice would have been done. And certainly, David HaMelech had every justification for issuing that capital punishment. But that's not how David HaMelech reacted. And that's not how it's recorded in Nach. And it's recorded in Nach because we need to learn from this, Rabbosai. A tremendously valuable eitzah in controlling ourselves when we're hurt and insulted. No one could be more insulted than David HaMelech was as he's running away from Avshalom, embarrassed and ashamed, and someone is throwing rocks at him and cursing him. And what does David HaMelech say? Vayomer HaMelech, ma li v'lachem b'nei Tzruya. What difference is this to you and to me, Tzruya? Ki yakalel, that he's cursing. He's cursing. Ki Hashem amar lo kalel es David. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put those words in his mouth. That wasn't him. If I heard a curse, this is min hashamayim. Umi yomar madua asisa kain. And who could say why Kadosh Baruch Hu decided I needed to be cursed? I had to hear it. I have to go through this nisayon. Everything in this world is min hashamayim. Everything that happens to us is a gezerah min hashamayim. Is he the one cursing? That's not the way we're supposed to look at it. There's a fabulous mashal. I don't remember where I saw it. I believe it was from the Mechtam Eliyahu, but I couldn't find exactly where Reb Dessler says, he gives a terrific mashal. He says, let's say you walk by and you see a man hitting a dog with a stick. What does the dog do? Typically the dog will growl and bite the stick. And you're observing this, and you're thinking to yourself, what a dumb animal. The dog is biting the stick. Yeah, the stick is what hit him, but the stick didn't decide to hit him. It wasn't the stick's decision to hit him. It was the man holding the stick, whacking the dog. But the dog doesn't bite the man. The dog bites the stick. Because that's the way a dog looks at it. He said, if someone is insulting or hurting us, the person who's hurting us or insulting us is a stick. And the Eibishter is wielding the stick. We're going to get angry at the person who insulted us? We're no better than the dog who's biting the stick. How foolish the dog looks biting the stick. It's the man who's beating the dog. It's a Kadosh Baruch Hu who's asking me to be cursed, David HaMelech said. So when we're insulted, when things don't go our way, when we're hurt, we're embarrassed, in any way, by anybody, this is the way we're supposed to look at it. We're supposed to see this as Min Hashamayim. The person who expressed the insult, expressed the disrespect, that's just the stick that a Kadosh Baruch Hu used. He could have picked up a different stick. Someone else could have said it to us. It was meant for us to hear. And that's the way we have to look at every threat to losing our tempers. So that's Eitzah number 2. Remember that everything comes Min Hashamayim. And we shouldn't be upset at the messenger because we don't like the message. I said there's 2 Eitzahs from David HaMelech. The second Eitzah comes 2 psukim later, Pasuk Yud Beis. David HaMelech says something else. Very profound, very powerful. In the same episode, it says as follows: Ulai yira Hashem ba'oni, ba'enai is the creed. V'heshiv Hashem li tova tachas klalaso hayom hazeh. Hashem will either see my suffering or see my eyes, the tear in my eyes, because it's painful to be insulted and embarrassed. It hurts. And David HaMelech was crying, literally crying. He was brought to tears by this episode. Maybe Hashem will see my suffering, see my tears in my eyes, and He'll give me back good in place of the suffering that I have now. Now, if you read the psukim later, you see that's exactly what happened. There was a turnaround that took place that led to David HaMelech being successful in avoiding Avshalom that day, regrouping his forces, succeeding in getting Avshalom not to pursue him at that moment. And the tables were turned. The battle took place. David HaMelech's forces were victorious. Avshalom was killed. David HaMelech came back to Yerushalayim victorious. The critical hinge point of the whole story was David HaMelech's handling of this curse. He said, when he's being cursed, he's being insulted, he's being embarrassed, it's a tremendous chus and a shas kaisha for his tefillas, and it can turn the whole story around. So when a person is triggered and the temper is about to explode, they should remember the example of David HaMelech. His life was literally saved by the way he handled this insult and by holding back and not giving the order for Shimi ben Gera to be executed, which he could have done. He merited, perhaps at that moment, the schus he needed to turn the tables on Avshalom and win the day, the following day in the battle. Now, I just want to conclude tonight's Vaad with an amazing story. It was told to me just recently by a younger man here in this neighborhood, but not someone I'm seeing in my office here in Lakewood, not someone I'm seeing in my office in Brooklyn. I do have conversations with people other than professional. And the younger man in this neighborhood who wanted to remain anonymous shared this story with me, which really illustrates the last 2 eitzes from David HaMelech in dealing with Kas. This took place about 15 years ago. This younger man was learning in Kollel in Eretz Yisrael with 2 of his friends. And one of the friends had a baby boy, and somehow he was zeicha to get the mirror Rosh Hashiva, Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel Zatzal, to agree to be the sandik at the bris. I don't know if he had a special kesher with him, or he had protection. It was just lucky. But he invited the Rosh Hashiva, and the Rosh Hashiva accepted. So, of course, he was thrilled. And the day the bris came, the father of the bris was there at the hall, and this younger man, who was friendly with the father of the bris, was there, and the son, and the moil was there, and the baby was there, and he couldn't believe his eyes when the Mirror Rosh Hashiva, Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkelzatzal, walked in on time at the bris. Now, as I'm sure you all realize, Reb Nosson Tzvi was not well, and any trip out of his house was agonizing, literally, and very difficult. And it was a pella that he even accepted to be the Sandik, that he came at all, but that he arrived on time was amazing. So the father of the boy was both thrilled and very anxious to get the bris underway so he wouldn't keep the Rosh Hashiva waiting. Well, everyone was there except the Kvater wasn't there. That was one of the three friends. Now the father of the baby was very eager to give this friend the Kvater, to be Kvater, because this friend had been married for over 4 years and didn't have children yet. And he wanted to be mezakeh him with this tremendous schooler to be the Kvater at his son's bris, but he wasn't there yet. So he couldn't keep the Rosh Hashiva waiting, so he quickly looked around to see who else he could give it to. He looked over to the ladies, he saw there were only 2 women there. One of them was his widowed bubby, so she couldn't be the Kvater. And the other was the wife of the third friend, the younger man who was telling me the story. So the father of the baby ran over to the younger man who told me the story and said, "Can you and your wife be Kvater?" He knew that the other friend was supposed to be Kvater, and the other friend was married for over 4 years and didn't have children. And this younger man was only married for 2 months. So he didn't feel he needed that schooler. He wanted his friend to have it, but what could he do? He understood the situation. The bris has to take place. He accepted. So he was the Kvater. The bris was done. Rosh Hashiva left. They sat down to the Suda. No sooner did they sit down to the Suda, but who walks in? The third friend who was supposed to be the Kvater. He sizes up the situation immediately, and he realizes he missed the bris. He sits down next to his friend, the younger man who's telling me the story, and he is absolutely livid. He's fit to be tied, he's furious. Now, he's not angry at the father of the bris. He understood. The Rosh Hashiva's here, you have to make the bris, can't wait. He wasn't angry at the younger man who told me the story, because he only accepted being Kvater to facilitate the bris. So he accepted being Kvater. Who was the friend angry with? He was angry with his wife. She took so long to get dressed. She was fussing with it, getting dressed, and fussing with the makeup. And I said, we have to get going. We're going to miss the bris. Just a few more minutes. A few more minutes here, a few more minutes there. We missed the whole bris. We missed this golden opportunity. He was fit to be tied. Now, the younger man who told me the story sees how this man his friend is seething. He described it to me. He said, I could see the smoke coming out of his ears. He was so angry. He felt as if he's witnessing a train wreck about to take place. He felt horrible for the couple. He felt worse for the wife, what she's going to get now. And he saw this is an enormous challenge to this couple, Shalom Bayis. He better do something quickly. He felt terrible. Not that he felt responsible. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't feel guilty, but he just felt he's got to intervene quickly. Otherwise, this is going to be a terrible disaster taking place. So he turns to his friend and he says, look, listen to me for a minute. He says, you have to believe that it was not b'shert for you to be the Kvater. This was nigza min hashamayim. This was not under your control. We don't know why Hashem didn't want you to be a Kvater. You have to believe that. That's number one. He saw he wasn't getting through. The smoke was still coming out of the ears. He said to me, and another thing I want to tell you. We believe that it's a skula for childbirth to be kvater. We believe that. But I want to tell you something else. If it's a skula to be kvater at a bris, and we believe it is, it's an even bigger skula if you're upset and you're angry with your wife and you don't get angry with her. If you're upset with her but you don't get angry with her and you hold back that anger, I'm telling you, it's going to be a bigger skula for you to have children. Well, it wasn't much more than 9 months after that bris took place, and the man who was supposed to be kvater and wasn't had a baby boy. And as if the Eibishter wanted to stress that the skula of holding back your anger when you feel the kas inside is even bigger. The younger man who was the kvater also had a child, but only 2 years after the bris. The one who held back his anger had a child barely 9 months after the bris. So that can emphasize the lessons that we were saying from David HaMelech that we can apply in our own lives if we have to control our own anger. I just want to announce to everybody that the next Vaad, B'ezras Hashem, will take place 4 weeks from tonight here in the Sterling Forest Ashkenaz Shul at the same time at 10:30 on Sunday night, February 26th, B'ezras Hashem. We do have an email address if anyone would like to suggest topics for us to address at future Vaadim, but I want to ask everyone, please, use that email address only to suggest topics or to give comments or feedback. But I'm asking people, please,